Okay, it looks like it's just that time. Can you hear me? Just go ahead and type in that chat log there, Ashley. Welcome. If you can hear me, just say, yes, I can hear you. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. We'll see if anybody else comes in here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Perfect. All right. So we are in week 2. Again, I introduced myself last week. If you missed that, definitely go back and look at your faculty information. I did put my a little video about my intro in there. So if you missed it, definitely go back. But this is the first live lecture that we are actually holding. We didn't have one last week. We just had a recording. So great to hold this live lecture. We'll see if anybody else comes in. And I'm planning to have these every Tuesday at the same time. I am Eastern Standard Time since I'm in Pittsburgh. So we'll see how this works. But it's not mandatory to be here. Obviously, you guys have your own schedules, and that is one of the good things because it's flexible. Being an online student, you can kind of make it work for your own schedule. So when we're done here, I will definitely post the link for the recording, not only in announcements, but also I will email it to all of you. So you'll have that. All right. So week 2, let's get started. So last week, we just kind of did a very slow kind of intro where we're kind of networking with each other, giving each other some, just a little brief background of who we are. And this is part of the process as a designer and as a college student. You guys can start networking, which is great, and build these connections up so that if you need a study partner or obviously somebody who, you can network with as you go forward into your program, this is a great way to do it. It's amazing how many opportunities I have had with staying in touch with students that I went to school with and just opening doors to new opportunities, keeping in touch, because obviously they get jobs. And then if you're keeping in touch, they might have opportunities. And if you're seeking that, you have that connection right away. So that's why it's really good to not only have, a fellow student to be your friend for, collaboration and studying, but also possible future opportunities. So make sure you're posting your intro if you haven't. Make sure you're responding to at least 2 peers to gain the most out of the discussion. And that's when you'll gain not only the most out of the discussion, but you'll also gain the most points. So if you missed that last week, say you just posted your intro and forgot to respond to 2 peers, please do so right away so that I can revise your grade accordingly. I'd hate to have you lose those points. Doesn't mean that that person will actually read it because we're in week 2 now, but just make sure that you're responding, especially this week. We're going to have another discussion to 2 peers so that you can really get the most out of this discussion. Because if the student's not reading it because it's from the week before, you're not going to get, what they're saying. So you guys can learn from each other in discussions. All right, let's go forward. So this week we are going to learn about the design process. And what does that actually mean? It's kind of and I always say this to students, it's the beauty behind what we do as designers. It may not look beautiful, but we have somebody else coming in here. All right, welcome, Elizabeth. We just started here. All right, hopefully she can hear me. If you can hear me, just go ahead and type in the chat area. I can hear you. Welcome, welcome. All right. And the design process. So we just kind of did a little intro here, but we're talking about the design process. And this is the part of design that usually clients don't see. So, don't feel bad if your design process doesn't look professional, because this is just for you as a designer. This is for you to implement yourself so that you can research and brainstorm and get as much information as you can before starting you're conceptualizing so that you can come up with more innovative and creative and meaningful concepts. We got some more people coming in here. Welcome, welcome. We are talking about the design process, and everybody's trickling in here. Great to see so many people in here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and mute you, by the way. Sorry about that. Okay. So, you know, the design process we do as designers, hopefully before every project. And not every process is the same, but we should be hitting upon certain things. And in that process is sketching. How many of you sketch? Look at these sketches here. This is what I'm talking about. So if you're starting, say, like a rebrand, or you're designing a logo, this would be an example of what your sketches may look like. This is the part of the design process that we do as designers. And why do we do this? Why do we do sketches? Does anybody know? What's the purpose behind sketches? Obviously to gain concepts, right? To get ideas. All right.
Sort of brainstorming.
Brainstorming, yes, exactly. Because, you know, sometimes we can be hindered, and when I say hindered, I mean slowed down when we go straight to the computer. And especially when you're new to a program. So say you're a student and you're learning a program, but you're also designing something, you're going to be hindered by the tools until you really get to know them, right? So that's why sketching is so important, because what's happening here is you're doing all the ideas that you're thinking in your head without being hindered by a computer and the software. So you might hit upon ideas that you never even thought about, instead of going straight to the computer and saying, I don't know what this tool is. And then it kind of just, all those ideas kind of fall apart. So that's why sketching is really super important. And we can kind of develop these sometimes, you know, as more seasoned designers. Like for me, I have 22 years of experience in the field. I will sketch things out, but I won't do like pages and pages, just because I'm so quick at doing my process now, because I've done it for a long time, that I can kind of condense a lot of things. So don't think that you have to, you know, create this huge extensive, when you're a seasoned designer, you won't have to go through all these steps. Very, you know, it kind of seems like a long process, but you won't have to do, welcome, Jonathan. You won't have to do, you know, 2 hours of sketching, you know, you'll do it a little quicker. Okay. So that's kind of why we do sketches. And then, like I said, the clients don't see this part of the process, but this is the beauty behind what designers do. This is the story of where we, you know, started. You know, our ideas are just kind of coming out. And did you ever think to yourself, I can't think of any ideas? Like I totally have a brain block of, I can't think of anything. Do you ever say that? You know, and I know anybody, even myself, who has a lot of experience. Yep. We, you know, people think as designers and creative people, we have the ideas all the time, but that's not the case. We're human. You know, so we also need to be inspired. So the design process, which is sketching is part of that, is a way for us designers to come up with more concepts, more meaningful and effective concepts, so that we're not sitting there going, I don't know what to do. So sketching is part of that process. Typically what happens is the first step, and we kind of skipped over that, is the research step. So we're defining the problem. So basically you get a project, that's the problem. How are you going to answer this problem? So you do your research, you talk to the client, you gather as much information about whatever you're doing, getting to know the target audience. That's the design brief part. And then step 2 in the process is brainstorming, and sketching is part of brainstorming. Now, not everybody really likes sketching, and I get that, but please, please, please implement that as much as possible. Just try to embrace it, because I think it will definitely help you. Like I said, you don't have to be a professional illustrator. I have students all the time saying, oh, you know, I'm so embarrassed, I don't want to show my sketches. It's okay. I'm not very good at drawing either myself. And I've had students that are really amazing illustrators and ones that are kind of like on my level. And that's okay. It's what your process is. It's as long as you can understand it and I can see it, and see those ideas, that's fine. That's exactly what I want. So this is just for you. So the design process, this is part of the design process, okay? Let's go ahead and go into discussion 2, because this kind of all rolls into what we'll be discussing this week. So what is the role of sketching in the design process? And we kind of talked about that briefly. So let's go ahead. I'm going to read off of this so that we know kind of what to expect for this discussion. So the role of sketching in the design process is the part of any project, print or digital. I mean, even if you're a web designer, you do this as well. And it should start on paper. So sketching can be an integral part of any design process, even if you can't draw. As a tool or skill, sketching has its role in the design process. That role will vary depending on the end product being created, the size and the scope of the project, the individual's designer's style, experience, and workflow, and the client's expectations. How will this process assist you as a designer? So this is the question we have posed for our discussions this week. We have more people coming in here. Great to see so many people. Yay. Hold on one second, you guys. All right. Welcome, Deanna. We kind of got 11 minutes in here, but you could always listen to the recording for what you missed. Okay, so how will this process assist you as a designer? Think about that. This is that question that you'll be answering for the discussions this week. And we all know the requirements, but I'm going to go over it anyway. So answer the topic question and reply to 2 peers in a meaningful manner. Don't just say, hey, I like that. I like your idea. Say why you like it. What are the, say it objectively. Like, don't subjectively say, I like this color because, it's my favorite color. Why do you think it works? Why do you think what they're saying works? Please connect to others too, respond to peer posts so that you guys can learn from each other. And feel free to also cite factual information. And this will be done through APA style. So you would just obviously paste that in there and then use a reference at the end. If you're referencing anything, I can post the APA style format as well in announcements if need be. So let's take a look. So I'm going to try to help you guys kind of support your discussion and inspire you to answer this question. How will this process assist you as a designer? We kind of talked about some of the advantages here. So I had this, and I posted this yesterday in announcements, this really cool website here that definitely, it's a lot of information. I'm not going to obviously read through all of this, but I think this is a great first article to start if you haven't read it yet. So basically talks about each step. Remember how I said that first step of your design process is research? So this is kind of showing you how sketching fits into that, okay? So it's telling you before you sketch, you need to have a clear understanding of the problem you're solving. So that research step is key. And then you go into sketching. And this is the brainstorming part, okay? So this is really the first steps in the design process that designers should do. And again, you could do them fast. They could be, very abstract at first, and then you can kind of, revise them and refine them if need be. A lot of web designers do this for wireframes is what they're called. So it basically shows a wireframe is like a sketch where it shows how the grid structure will be, where the navigation bar will be, where the images will be on each page. And it just helps them create this flow so that's cohesive whenever you're accessing the website. So definitely go through this, read through this, has sketching benefits. This is something that you can pull from as a resource if you'd like. Just make sure you're using that reference at the bottom of your post. But it goes through the sketching benefits. So it save time in the workflow process. Great for brainstorming ideas, collaborating with team members, refining the wireframe. This is for web design process. So, and don't forget, put your 2 cents in there. Maybe you had an experience, even if you're, just a student, and I'm not saying just a student, you are a student. Maybe you had an experience of sketching in for a prior project that you worked on. How did that work out for you? How did that help you? Put your, your actual experience in your post. And here's some tools and a conclusion. So it's not really that long, but it's kind of nice to see how those steps work. Okay. And so that's something that you can use as a resource. There's many out there too that you can definitely explore. And because, I like to show you in my own terms of my process steps, I'm going to show you how I used brainstorming sketching in my practices. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this. This is a blog that I created many, many years ago for when I attended Savannah College of Art and Design. We had to not only do a project like you guys are doing, but we also had to submit a whole completely different process book. So this process book for every project was very extensive, and it showed basically our whole design process throughout the entire project. So this is something that you're not going to be doing per se, but I just wanted to show you how it worked for one of my classes that I worked on, because it's nice to see how designers do all of this. So this is a typography Studio 1 class that I had. And basically what I was doing was I was given a quote, and I chose a quote, and then I chose an appropriate typeface to transcend the meaning of the quote. So I started with my cover page, and this is my layout, the problem. What's the problem? Okay. And then I went forward, and this is everything done by me, by the way. I did my research into that quote. I stated what the problem was. This is my research part. I did the meaning of the quote. So I kind of really looked into all this. And this is where in the project you'll be researching about the target audience, the brand, the client themselves. You'll be gaining information from. And then you observe the target audience. And then you have, deliverables, maybe in your brief. This is kind of like a brief per se, I guess, but my process book. Research and development starts at this point. And this is where I'm gaining some inspiration. So I would go out and look at, images, anything that inspires me. I can even take pictures. But here I'm just kind of gaining inspiration on typefaces, shape, color, mood, and essence. This is kind of like a mood board, I guess, in some way, where you're kind of getting that inspiration of what you want your project to look like, what inspires you. And then from there, this is what we're talking about now, is your brainstorming process. This is where the sketches come into play. So when you gather all that information, now you're in step 2, which is the brainstorming, even though it says part 3. And the quote that I did for this was, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world," by Gandhi here. So here I am kind of looking at different typefaces and color. Again, could be considered a mood board at this point. Brainstorming can be anything. It could be, obviously it's sketches. It can be a mind map. If you ever heard of a mind map, that's where you're branching off from one singular idea or word and thinking of other ideas that connect to that. I do adjective lists all the time. So when I get a project, that's usually the first thing I do, even before sketching, is I do an adjective list. So I look at this quote and I think, what comes into my mind when I think of this quote? And I list a whole bunch of adjectives. And what's cool about the adjective list is you can then pick your, favorite adjectives, and you can choose typefaces and colors and other like shapes based off of these adjectives. And here I go sketching. So this is what we're talking about now, sketching ideas from that adjective list. You can see my pictures here. I'm sketching ideas out. How can I show this in a way that's going to make it, really express the quote in a meaningful way, not just verbally, but visually too. So here I am kind of thinking of ideas. Concept number one is when I'm kind of, once I do those sketches, you can refine those and pick your best. You know, you can collaborate with other designers or students, pick out what you think is the best, and then really hone in on the concept here. So I'm kind of looking at this in more detail. And again, this is very, very detailed information I'm showing you. So you won't have to do this per se, just kind of understand that this is part of that process. And you can go into detail like this. Here's another concept two, how this would look. Concept three. So kind of thinking about which one would be the best. Which one would be the best? Here I am looking at circles. This is concept four. And here I am looking at concept number five. So I have a lot of concepts going on here, which is great because then you can kind of gather information from people, get feedback, and hone in on a design. So here I am making it. So I go from the sketching. So we're kind of getting out of the sketching brainstorming to actually making. So I'm doing roughs. These are called roughs. So I go from thumbnail to roughs. Okay, so this would be a rough for concept number one. This would be a rough for concept number two. This would be a rough for concept number three. Remember, I sketched that out. You saw it earlier. And then I go back and I redo, you know, because the process, our design process is not linear. We can always go back to step one or two if we need to. So I'm kind of going back. So I'm analyzing what works, getting that feedback, brainstorming process, revisited. So I actually went back to step two. And here I am doing more sketches because I'm not quite sure if I'm there yet. I'm kind of gaining that information. Okay, so here's my concept number one revised. And I did all this in Illustrator, by the way, just FYI. The actual pages, I did it in Design, but the examples I did in Illustrator. Here's concept number three. Did I skip one? No, that's three, sorry. There's that one. And I kind of give it a little bit of an idea of what that is. And then you finalize once you get to, you know, maybe you get feedback from other people, even the client. This is where you kind of revise and you finalize your concept. So this is concept number one, finalized. Concept number two, finalized. And concept number three. So you kind of get an idea of how that process looks. And I can show you other examples too. I have another mythology thing, but I just wanted to show you, here's my sketches here and my adjective list. I love adjective lists. That this sketching is part of that process. Okay. And look, I don't really have the best sketching skills. Look at my sketches. They're not that great. So, but at least you can see what's going on and you get the idea. So that is kind of a nice little peek into the world of how I used sketching in my, you know, in my experiences. And I do this with clients before starting any project as well. Any questions about that? Go ahead and just chat in there if you have any questions. No? Okay, good. All right. So let's go forward to your assignment. This is what you're here for, right? You want to know what the heck's going on with your assignment. This is what worth some points here. So we are going to be doing the power of grid. We're going to learn about grids, but we're also going to practice and experiment with grids in this assignment. So let's go ahead and go forward. And before we get into the assignment, let's talk about the power of grids. So I'm going to read through here real quick. Behind each well-designed document is an effective grid system. A grid can be simple or complex, and each plays a significant role in generating cues for the placement of design elements in your document. Simply put, grids are an essential design strategy for organizing text and images. So the key to defining a perfect grid structure is to understand your grid options. So fortunately, there are several InDesign tools you can use to provide as much or as little grid structure as your design project requires. InDesign's grid tools are divided into several areas. So you'll see this as you go forward, and these could be some of your vocab words here. So you have ruler guides, and this is where you can create a custom grid based by dragging guidelines from the horizontal and vertical rulers onto your document. I'll show you that in a second. Then you have guidelines. Creating a custom grid using ruler guides one at a time is time consuming. So if you're attempting to create precise rows and columns on your page, instead have InDesign create a custom guide for you with options for assigning an exact number of vertical columns and horizontal rows with an option for gutter width. Then you have column guides, and they are the tool of choice for creating and managing columns of text, and the baseline grid, which enables you to align your text and images effortlessly. Now, there are other lines down here that you'll see on this example here that we'll talk about, but this is basically, so E and F are the ones we didn't talk about. So let's take a look at A. So A is your spread. So that would be where your document, the white part of your artboard, the trim line is, where it kind of meets that dark edge. So that's the spread. That's what's called spread. B is your page, and that's the black line. C is your margin guide. So let's go ahead and look at this. So see where the letter C is? It's pointing to that purple line. That's not going to print. That's your margin guides. And margin guides are good because what happens is that it balances your information and also aligns your information so that you have proper white space kind of balancing your layout. I always refer to that as, think of it as like a picture frame. The bigger the frame around that picture, the more important that information inside becomes. So that's your margin guides, the magenta lines. And then letter D is your column guides. You can see that they're darker. Those are column guides. And that's a 3-column grid you can see on the right there. 3-column grid. And then E and F are basically those we're not going to go over today, but those are your bleed area. That's for any, say if like a picture were to bleed off the page, you would account for that so that if it's printed on the press and if it shifts and you don't have that bleed set up, you might see like a white gap. So you want to pull that image down past that trim edge so that it doesn't happen. And then the slug area, oh, there we go. I got my little alert here. I might have to come back in here. I realized I was using my personal account here for Zoom. I might have to end this and come back in. Just FYI, you might want to come back in about 10 minutes if this stops. My apologies. So the F is the slug area. That's just basically where you could put printer information in there for them. So if you have Pantone colors, for example, you can have that in there. So as you get more familiar with using an effective grid structure, you will start to see how quickly you can create and maintain consistency on a page and enhance visual hierarchy within your design. So for you, the designer, a well-defined grid can take the guesswork out of where to place elements on the page. It's really like a no-brainer. Like once you have a grid set up, it should not fail. It should always work as long as you're laying it out correctly. So, and you can always break the grid. You don't always have to use a grid, just a FYI on the side. If it calls for breaking a grid for an ad or something like that, obviously you don't have to use a grid, but it's great for a lot of information. So for like a magazine layout, you have a lot of copy, you have a lot of different parts and pieces, images that you want to use a grid so that you can organize that information so that it's easier for the viewer when they are reading the article. They know where to look first, second, and third. All right, so we'll get into InDesign here in a second. I can show you kind of how to set up those guides. So I think what I'm going to do now, so we're not interrupted so abruptly, is I'm going to stop this. I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. Once I stop this, go ahead and take a 5-minute break. This will be good for everybody because I've been talking. And come back to the same link, and I will record a second chunk of this video. And then I will tour the interface of InDesign, and then we'll go into your demo for your assignment. Does that sound good?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So meet me back here in 5 minutes and we'll just chunk this into 2 videos. All right. See you guys.